welcome. It is time for another episode of I Didn't Sign Up for This, where we talk about all of the things we just didn't sign up for. Carrie, what's going on?
Hey, Tim. Tonight I want to talk about reality and perception and the differences between what reality is and maybe our perception of reality.
Okay.
So I think in a business environment, a lot of times when you're being coached on something by someone you report to, there's always that little disclaimer, remember to guard your words and actions and remember that perception is reality. And my whole take on that is, the definition of reality is basically what the truth is. And then perception is how we see the truth. And I think that it's very similar to a fingerprint in the sense that everybody's perception is different based on the experiences and what they bring to the table. But it also can be based on their attitude as well. Like everybody, you can look at a glass and say it's half full or half empty. And the truth is it's measured at the same point. And so really it's your perception of the situation or the scenario. And I think from a progression perspective, and then obviously we have a lot of realists out there. I think that it's important to take into consideration what reality is and what our perception of it is.
Okay.
So is perception reality? Is there an opportunity? Because if your perception of the world molds your reality, how do you evolve? How do you move from where you are today into a new reality? Because ultimately, when I want to change something, when I want to lose 10 pounds, or I want to get accolades for a project at work, or I want to have better relationships with the people in my life, my perception of the situation has to change. Because if I accept my current perception today as reality, then there is no room for change. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I just don't agree with that.
Oh, why?
Because you're assuming perception is somehow static. It's not. Your perception is constantly changing based on what you are focusing on, based on what you're looking at, and then on a deeper level, based on how you choose to see that thing.
So perception is fluid. Is reality fluid or is reality static?
I think reality is actually pretty fluid.
Okay. So both are fluid. Okay.
Both are fluid. I've oftentimes compared it to, people will assume that absolute reality is the land and absolute perception is the river or the fluid notion of the river or the lake or whatever coming up to the shore, right? Your perception kind of alters quite a bit. But the absolute truth of the matter is the absolute truth of the matter is the absolute truth of the matter, and that is an absolute rock, and it never moves.
Okay.
And I believed that for a big part of my life. I don't believe it so much anymore. Just through my own education and study and looking at things from different perspectives. I see it more as your perception is a current in the ocean. It's a current moving through a much larger body of water, so that both are in fact fluid and interdependent upon one another. Wow, this sounds like some philosophical stuff.
Yeah, it does.
This sounds deep.
Yeah.
You see what I did there? Deep water and deep... No, never mind.
I'm drowning over here.
And so I guess the point is it goes well beyond... The question goes well beyond work or work environments or even personal relationships. It's more of the underpinnings of life itself and what is the nature of life. Is there a reality is the same as saying, what's the meaning of life? And luckily I happen to know. So.
Well, I think that if you want to change something in your life, if you're not happy with where you are today, or maybe you're okay, but you want better than okay, your reality and your perception of the situation is parallel, and it's equating to unhappiness or an unfulfilled life. And in order to evolve and move into a better and newer reality, you have to let go of your current state and move into a space where you believe that that's possible, or you believe that that can change. And a lot of that has to do with attitude. A lot of it has to do with pulling from experiences, strength, being able to succeed in adversity and take challenges head on, as opposed to, well, we'll see what happens. You know, I mean, the guy that sits there and is like, well, we'll see what happens, is going to be sitting there saying, well, we'll see what happens when he's 70. Like that doesn't change. And so really, it's like sitting on a, it's like sitting on a burner. Okay. So let's just say that you're sitting on a burner and that burner's off and you have no reason to move because you're sitting on a burner. But the minute somebody lights that fire under your ass, I guarantee you're going to be up and moving.
Yeah.
And there is a reason for that. And so that's where motivation, that's where motivation comes in. And we could probably do a whole separate podcast on how you find your motivation. In fact, that's probably a pretty good topic. But going back to reality, if you want to make a change, your reality is not okay today, or your perception of the situation is not okay.
Well, let's dig a little deeper into it. Let me give you an example, right?
Okay.
Suppose that you're walking along a beach and you live there on the beach, right? You sleep on the beach at night, you swim during the day, you fish, you pick coconuts out of the trees, pineapples out of the dunes there. But you wish that somehow in your life you could eat apples. You really want crisp, cold apples. You just want to have that experience in your life. And so you go home every night and you think about it, you dream about it. And that could be, the perfect mate or significant other. That could be, I want to drive a Lamborghini. That could be, I want a better job or start my own business or travel the world. The apples represent essentially anything, okay?
Mm-hmm.
As you're walking up and down that beach day after day after day, spearing fish on one side and pulling coconuts out of trees on the other, absolutely sick of fish and coconuts and dreaming every night of crisp red apples, do you believe the apples exist?
Yes.
Because that's your hope, that's your dream. How is it that you think the apples exist?
Because you're dreaming about them. So ultimately, because you're dreaming about them, the thought is there somewhere that these apples exist.
And where did that thought come from?
It would have had to have come from an experience, wouldn't it?
An experience or an external source of some variety. Mm-hmm. You've heard tell of the apple, just like you've heard tell of the Lamborghini driver. You've heard tell of the world traveler, right? You've read something, seen something, you've talked about it, and now that is embedded into your heart and soul and become a deep-seated aspiration. You wish that you could have that somehow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, as you continue to walk back and forth on the beach day after day, fish in one hand, coconut in the other, your perception is that you cannot have apples. And your reality is that you cannot have apples. And the fact is, you can't have apples till you get the hell off that beach. Till you go 100 miles inland, you're never going to find apples. And so your perception is fluid and your reality is fluid based on your perception.
Okay, that makes sense. And that also explains why I dream about handsome strangers all the time.
There you go.
I'm going 10 miles inland right now. No, I think, okay, so that makes sense. So if they're both fluid and they're constantly evolving, but they are linked. So is there a reality, or is it all our perception of existence?
It's both. There is a reality, and then there is our perception of reality. Well, I'll do a little thought experiment here with you for a second. If you were to look across the room and you see that piece of art hanging on the wall, okay? Mm-hmm. Your belief, your deeply held assumption about that piece of art hanging on the wall is that the artist's signature is at the bottom right-hand corner, and the top of the painting is 2 or 3 feet higher, hanging on the wall, attached somehow, and it is right side up. And that would be your absolute belief. Is that correct to say?
Yeah, I'm looking at a painting that I drew myself right now.
Okay, excellent. And so I would be really hard pressed to convince you that there is even the remotest chance that that painting is in fact upside down. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's back out to a little bit of work done by NASA here a few years ago. NASA has this fraternity, this boys' club, not as much a boys' club anymore, but it certainly was back in the day, wherein they bring in new prospective astronaut trainees and they educate them on the nuances of becoming an astronaut. Now, very few of them ever do, but many of them certainly apply for the program and participate in the base level trainings. So, with one of these groups, one of the scientists had a question about perception versus reality. And so he instructed a group of these potential astronauts to wear goggles, crystal clear goggles, no change to the vision whatsoever, absent the fact that the lenses in the goggles were prismatic. They were prisms.
Okay.
Now, if you've ever looked through the prism of a camera or even a handheld prism when you were a kid in science class, you will notice that a prism bends the light and turns everything that you are seeing upside down and backwards. So left is now right, right is now left, up is down, down is up. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
They put these goggles on through the course of the day. Anytime there was any light out, any light in the room, they were to be wearing these goggles or risk getting drummed out of the program. And they wore the prismatic goggles, and they were dizzy, and they were sick, and they were falling all over themselves, and it's all they could do to go get a bite to eat at the cafeteria. Everything's upside down and backwards. They're able to take the goggles off at night, but only when every source of light is completely extinguished. So they're in a windowless black room lying in a bed at night, and there is absolutely no light, like you're in a dark room.
Uh-huh.
Then you can take the goggles off, and you can, wash the goggles or whatever you want to do. You can grab a shower, feel your way around, go to bed, get up the next morning, alarm goes off, you put the goggles on, then the door opens, then the lights. And so these poor guys are walking around, seeing the world upside down and backwards. Until about the 20th day, it ranged from about 17 or 18 days on the earliest to about the 22nd, 23rd day on the latest. But about the 20th day, everything for everybody switched. Everything they were seeing with the sky below them and the land above them and the upside down people in front of them walking left to right when in fact they were moving from right to left flipped 180 degrees, and now looking through the prismatic goggles they could see everything as it actually existed according to their perception, their new perception. And they could walk, they could talk, they could go to lunch, they could read, they could drive.
So they adapted to their new perception.
They adapted to their new perception.
That's crazy.
And by adapting to your new perception, you open up a whole world of possibilities. Because your real perception is that the world is right side up, but you are seeing it upside down because of the prism. And there is no way to change that. Except for, in the human condition, we can just leave that middle part out about the prism. Let's forget about that part. And now, wearing the prisms, they can just walk and talk and drive, and left is left and right is right and up is up and down is down, and everything's back to normal after about 20 days of concerted effort. Sometime later, they took the goggles off. Everything was upside down and backwards again, with their eyeballs this time. Now there are no prisms, and everything is flipped around, upside down. The fact of the matter is, when you go over and look at that painting on the wall, and you reach out to brush your hand along the signature of the artist, you're just reaching for the signature. You're reaching for what you call down. You're reaching for what you call the bottom.
Right.
You don't know that, though. You could have simply adapted to alterations in your condition that happened years or centuries ago. None of us knows. Up and down, right and left, relative to what? We don't know. We see the world not as it is, but as we are. Friedrich Nietzsche.
Mm-hmm.
We see the world through our own goggles, and our own goggles define what we see.
Well, that reminds me of a story that I've heard. I can't remember. It may be a religious story. I've heard it multiple times, but there's a man standing guard at the city door, the city gate. And it's his responsibility to let people in. And this man comes up to him, and in the course of their conversation, he says, well, how are the people in this city? And the guard responds to him, well, how were they in your last city? And he's like, oh, they were awful. They were dishonest and cheaters, and they were mean, and they were nasty people. And the guard says, well, I'm fairly certain you'll find the same type of people in this city. And then a couple hours go by, and another man approaches the guard, and he wants to be led into the city, and he asks the same question. And the guard says, well, how were they in the last city? And he said, oh, the people in my last city were kind and warm and generous and compassionate and caring. And he says to him the same thing. He says, you'll find the same thing in this city. And so really you find what you look for in your world and in your relationships and in your job. And it's so funny because in a corporate environment, we're constantly concerned with culture. We want to create a good culture for people. And what that ultimately boils down to is their perception of a strong work environment and how we can contribute, or how the corporation can contribute to making that a better place. And as we move into a situation where we're hiring more and more of that millennial base in our corporate environment and in our businesses, the evolution of culture is changing, and the perception of what contributes to that culture is evolving. It's not what it was 20, 30 years ago, where it's like, okay, I want my vacation and a bonus would be nice. Now it's, I want carpool and I want parties and I want recognition, and I want events where I'm recognized for my performance, and I want groups and commiseration and culture club and all these different things that evolve because the reality of the business is evolving and changing, and so we have to shift our perception to make it something that works for a wide range of people.
Right.
So it's interesting. I see your point. And I guess I'm very, being the extremist that I am, or the black and white that I am, I've always felt like reality is what's true and perception is how you see it. But ultimately, maybe it is weighted more on perception.
Yeah, because I believe that by and large, truth is a very personal thing that is controlled by your perception, your paradigms, your beliefs, because you can't see the whole picture. Understand that perception is nothing more than the interpretation of reality. That interpretation of reality is considerably different from a mole to a mouse, because the mole has no eyes, and so the mole feels its way through perpetual darkness with its face, with its mouth, and that's how it sees reality. That's how it interprets everything that happens in its life. And so the mole has no idea that it's dark outside or light outside. The reality is that it is either dark or light outside. But since the mole has no way of perceiving that reality does not exist for the mole. The mole is right. It's always dark. And the mouse is right. Sometimes it's light, sometimes it's dark. Both of them are speaking absolute truth based on their personal experience.
You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of, have you ever been in one of those skyscrapers where they have the landing where it's all glass below?
Yeah.
And so when you step out onto this completely secure piece of the building, but yet there is a fear, like the skywalk over the Grand Canyon. When you go out onto the skywalk, because it's glass on the bottom, your perception is that you're in danger.
I know. My butt clenches right up.
Doesn't it, though?
I couldn't poop for a week after walking out on that thing.
It's just crazy. But that's all it is it's your mind perceiving that because the surface that you're standing on is transparent, it must not be there.
That's right.
And so really you can fool your mind. You can
Absolutely.
You can trick your mind into a new way of thinking or perceiving an experience. I mean, think about it. It even comes back to roller coasters, skywalks, bungee jumping, jumping out of airplanes, haunted houses, all of those things that get adrenaline going, where you ultimately are perceiving that you're in danger. With the exception of skydiving, because, well, I won't ever be doing that. But you perceive that you're in some imminent danger, and you get that adrenaline going, and your fight or flight kicks in, and ultimately you're completely safe.
Right.
And so I guess that's an example of how you're perceiving reality in that moment, and how your body and your mind are responding to that stimulus, when in actuality it's not real.
It's not real.
So what is real?
Real is whatever you wind up with at the end of the day once you're done interpreting all of this.
So it's bits and pieces from your experiences and your life.
Bear, it gets more complicated than that, because you only see what you look for.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's why you have to sit down at night, take whatever goal in mind that you could possibly have, and you sit down, your apple, for lack of a better word. You have to define exactly what your apple is, even though you've never tasted one, and you have to envision it. You have to open your mind to the apple before you can bring it into your reality, because in reality, apples exist. In your reality, walking up and down the beach, they do not, and they never will. Too much salt in the water. You're never going to grow apples beachside.
Right.
So you've heard tell they exist. You desperately want one, but even though you feel like they're out there, you will never experience one until you leave the beach. But you'll never leave the beach unless you know you can have that apple. And you don't know. You just start walking and asking and looking for apple. You move in the direction of your goals. And that's an act of faith. So you have to think, plan, project, and then exercise faith to attain anything new, to change your perception. You have to change your knowledge and your experiences and your belief set.
Right.
But you're right earlier, when the notion that perception is set, perception can be set. And there is no hope for change if you choose to allow that to happen. But if you don't choose to allow that to happen and you want something more, you can absolutely have something more.
Well, and that's the difference in, okay, so I went to a seminar probably 20 years ago. And it was this, I worked for a company that wanted to send their employees through this motivational thing. And so we went to the seminar, and one of the points that they made is there are people who live in inner city projects, and their grandparents live there, their parents lived there, and they live there, and they're raising their kids there. Well, okay, so why don't they leave?
Because they don't believe they can.
Right. They don't believe that they can, because it becomes the norm. It becomes the reality, and they may be miserable. They may be living in a neighborhood that is crime ridden, but for some reason, they can't say, you know what, I'm going to apply for a job in California, and I am going to pick my family up, and I'm going to move to San Diego. Anything's possible. If perception and reality are fluid, and neither one are static, then every day you wake up, you basically wake up with a clean slate.
That's right.
But how many people wake up thinking about that? How many people wake up and go, woohoo, new day. The past is the past. I'm starting over, because it takes work. It takes a constant exercise to do that, and a reinforcement on a daily basis. I don't do that. And I like to consider myself fairly stable and fairly in tune with the fact that I can evolve as a human being. But I don't do that, because I'm still linked to the experiences of the day before, or whatever it is that I'm going through that consumes my mind when I'm getting ready for work. And I'll be honest, that is part of the reason that I don't watch the news anymore. It's so funny, because I'll go into work, and I'm sitting there with a group of people, and they start talking about the things on the news that have happened, and they're never good. I mean, news isn't good. It should be. But I started listening to motivational videos, or I'll go back and listen to some of our content, or I'll listen to whatever book it is that I'm going through that week. And when I'm on the way to work in my car or on the way home, I listen to uplifting stuff. You know, it's funny, I went to start a movie today. And it was the middle of the day, and I decided I was going to watch a movie, and 15 minutes into the movie, I had to stop myself because I realized that what I was watching was not uplifting, and it wasn't going to make me feel good at the end of the 2 hours.
Right.
And so I literally stopped the movie because I didn't want the residual energy and the residual impact from watching something that wasn't uplifting. I am 43 years old. It's taken me until right now to get to that point. And that's being vigilant about trying to evolve my life to be the best version of myself that I can. But when you constantly focus on the negative and you're listening to, I mean, I used to turn on the news just like everybody else does when they're getting ready for work in the morning. Okay, by the time you leave, you have anxiety because you've heard about 15 accidents, 3 rapes, and 5 murders.
I know.
You don't hear about the good things that happen in the world and about the charity and
Nor will you.
Right.
You never will.
Right.
Because that's how we're wired as human beings. Because we spent a couple 100,000 years somewhere in the middle of the food chain, we respond to fear and titillation of whatever variety. Right? We have this primordial reptilian brain that is at the core of everything that we think, that is constantly looking for the saber-toothed tiger in the bushes, so to speak. And because of that, we are not drawn to stories about fluffy kitties. We're just not. We want to see the train wreck. We don't want to see the train wreck, but we have to see the train wreck. And so, because the news outlets are out there selling advertisements to make money, I mean, let's face it, every news outlet out there is the Weekly World News. Everyone. New York Times, Weekly World News. CNN, NBC, CBS, Weekly World News. That's all it is. It's Bat Boy. We want something that is terrifying. Meteor heads toward planet Earth. That's all we freaking want.
I would rather not know if there's a meteor heading towards planet Earth. I just want you to know.
No, I can appreciate that. But that is what sells advertising at the end of the day. That's what gets eyeballs to focus on the screen, right?
Right.
When we come back, meteor plunges toward planet Earth. Have you ever considered your retirement? Right? It's like, that's what we do, right? Stick around for the commercial. That's all we ever do. And so the news is not necessarily meaningful or even true anymore. I mean, you talk about all of this fake news crap that you read about in the news, ironically enough, with every news outlet, call it every other news outlet, fake news. It's all fake news. There's little shreds of truth, and then it's fluffed up to keep your attention through the commercial break so they can tell the advertiser, you watch the commercial and so pay us our money. And that's just the world we live in. And so I agree with you.
Yeah, it can change though. And that's what people don't understand. You can turn the news off and listen to something uplifting and motivational. You can be getting ready for work in the morning and listening to a book that talks about bringing positivity into your life. And I'm not trying to be fluffy. Like, by nature, I'm a pretty fluffy cheerleader type person. Otherwise, I wouldn't want to be a life coach and help make people's lives better and cheer them on as they achieve their goals. Like, that is fulfilling for me. And I understand that there are people out there that are more realists than I am, right? Because I'm definitely swinging towards that optimistic side as much as I can. But that doesn't mean I've always been like that. Not with myself, not with life in general. You can focus on the positive things. I said this to somebody the other day. I was talking to 2 people in the office, and one of them was talking about their life and how everything's so amazing and everything is so great that, they're just waiting for something to happen. And I literally said to these people when I was talking to them, what if we lived in a world where we were able to learn from positive experiences? where we didn't have to create a negative scenario or a negative event in our life to pull the lesson from? What if we were able to do that? And then I started thinking about that, and I thought about the things that my family has gone through over the last year, and how we lost a member of our family, how we're very close, and how we lost a member of our family, and how devastating that was. And how there are things that happen in your life that you can't control. And I thought, am I too optimistic? But then I realized, here's where it all comes together. You are going to have events in your life that you can't control. But if you will focus on the positive and focus on learning the lesson from the positive experiences, you're not going to bring any more scenarios into your life that you potentially could have controlled to try to teach you a lesson. And maybe there are people out there that are listening to this that don't necessarily get that. But that's my take on it. You will have things that you can't control. People will pass away. You will lose people that mean something to you. You will have failure. You will have events that you have to pick yourself up from and you have to respond to. But if you can live in a positive space and focus on positivity, even though you have to endure some of the negative things that happen, you're not going to cascade additional events into your life over and over and over that create this awful existence. I don't believe that. I don't believe that we have to live in a world where we learn from our negative experiences only. I believe that we can bring positive things into our life to learn the lesson. You just have to be able to acknowledge the lesson. And so it's interesting to me because that is my new perception. That wasn't my perception of life 10 years ago. It wasn't my perception of life 6 years ago, 5 years ago.
Right.
It's something that's had to evolve. And so if that's what I've made my reality, then I can see where it's all fluid.
Well, I think that is probably the most important takeaway. Is just the turn of phrase, make my reality. Because we do, in fact, make our reality. We find our way to what we're looking for. You know, I mean, if you were to leave the house right now, drive to the end of the road, turn left or right, well, it depends on what you're looking for. So, if you're looking for the same thing as someone else, then the variable becomes where you're leaving from. But there's a way to get to whatever it is you want, but you have to look for it. You have to think about what you want and lay out strategies to achieve what you want and then exercise faith that you can have them. Perception is reality in so much that we take our perceptions and change our decisions based on what we think the reality can be. I mean, if I don't think that I can accomplish a given goal, insert goal here, dunk a basketball. I don't think I'll ever dunk a basketball again. So one thing I'm not going to be doing is plyometric training to increase my jumping ability or yoga stretches to increase the elasticity of my tendons. I'm not going to be playing basketball every day. I'm not going to be doing wind sprints. I'm not going to be doing stair work or jump rope or any of it because I do not believe that that goal is attainable. Thusly, I will not work toward that goal. Now, whether that goal is attainable or not, if I believe that it is attainable and I exercise faith in that belief, then the reality of its being attainable changes. All of a sudden, just by virtue of my belief and subsequent actions, it becomes an attainable goal. Whereas before, it was just unrealistic.
Like the 4-minute mile.
The 4-minute mile. Dr. Roger Bannister, absolutely. Dr. Bannister was told that he would die. If he could even accomplish it, he would die within a half an hour. His heart would explode because it was absolutely impossible. And yet, within a year of him doing it, another 13 people did it because they believed it was possible. They realized their heart wouldn't explode. And so they just went out and worked hard and then ran it.
Right.
Absolutely the same.
So what we're saying is it's not about what you perceive as reality or even what reality is. It's about the ability to create your life, aside from any preconceived notions or any paradigms that you had yesterday.
That's right.
Because in this world, they don't fit.
Everything exists in potentiality until you make it real. And I don't want to get too much into the physics of it all because it's tedious. But absolutely everything is possible all the time and always around you. Have you ever read the book The Secret?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I don't believe in The Secret.
Don't tell anyone.
Secret. Shh.
It's a secret. What? Okay, tell me why you don't, because I'm curious.
Okay, and so to clarify, some of the concepts and principles in there are correct in my estimation. They're barking up the right tree.
Okay.
But they don't really have it.
Tell me why.
I believe that you do not focus on something and draw it into your life. That's where I differ.
Okay.
I believe it's already in your life and you don't recognize it. I believe that everything you need, everything that you could possibly want or need to accomplish anything or not, already exists all around you all the time. And you just don't recognize it. And so when you begin to focus on it, look for it, you change your perception, and there it is in your three-dimensional reality. And it was there all along.
I don't know how I feel about that, because I believe that you can create the life that you want, and I think you do have to set the intention that it's what you want. But I also don't think that I can sit in my little ranch house out in the middle of the desert and say, I want to meet the most amazing man, and I'm going to have $80 million in the bank within the next 7 years, and I make this whole list of what is going to happen for me. And then I just sit on my ass and wait for it to knock on my door. And I don't believe that. I believe it takes work.
See, but that's what The Secret infers.
Right, and I know.
And I'm with you. I don't believe that at all.
Yeah. That's why I wanted you to tell me first what you disbelieve about it, because it would be great if we lived in a world. It reminds me, the cartoon, The Jetsons, where they would go to the machine and they would just they'd get whatever food or drink they wanted. And every time they opened it, it would just come out and it was materialized for them. And, all the futuristic movies. No, there's somebody back there cooking. There's somebody back there slinging eggs and bacon so that when you push the eggs and bacon button, so somebody's doing the work. And if it's not you, then you're going to atrophy.
Right.
Now, I also, on the flip side, I know we've talked about this, I believe in being strategic and working smart and getting to your goal the best that you can in an efficient way. I don't believe in, spinning wheels, but the whole thing about bringing things into your life, I believe that you can bring stuff into your life, but it takes a desire and work towards it. And it's funny because I just read Pam Grout's book, E Squared and E Cubed, and I know that you read them with me, so we can talk a little bit about that. But some of the positive intention exercises, they work. They absolutely work. But it also is because it's what you're focused on in the 48-hour experiment time frame. So you find what you look for. Okay, you're still looking for it. You're still doing the work.
You have to look for it. That's correct.
Yes. Because honestly, if you look at the philosophy of The Secret, if I put a negative thought out there, I am screwed. Right. I am screwed because I have put it out in the universe. And so it's coming at me.
It's coming
180,000 miles an hour. And there's nothing I can do to stop.
Release the Kraken!
And I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound fun to me. And then the whole disclaimer is that a positive thought creates more energy than a negative one. Okay, have you ever been around a negative person? They can create some pretty big energy. I mean, so I agree. I agree. I do believe that you have to. I love vision boards. I love a lot of the philosophy of The Secret, but I agree with you. The part that's missing is pushing your shirt sleeves up and making it happen, because we have the freedom to do that.
And all of that is taking action through faith in the face of adversity.
Right.
And all things are adversity, right? The distance between you and your goal is the adversity. And you have to believe you can attain the goal. And then, as you put it, push your shirt sleeves up and start working toward it with an absolute belief and faith that you can have it. And if that's the case, you will find your apples. You absolutely will.
But the work is where we evolve. And I'm not sure that people truly grasp that. So I am at the beginning, and I want to get to a new place. The work and the steps that I take are what change me into the person that allows me to take that new spot in my life.
Right.
I mean, that's how I feel about it. And it doesn't have to be a grueling Tom Hanks and Castaway type scenario. You don't,
that's right.
You don't have to hurt. You don't have to suffer. It can be a positive experience, but it's the experience. It's the journey. It's not the destination to, just over cliche this whole podcast tonight. But that's the truth of it.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. So, so many of us never actually pursue our hopes and dreams and goals and ambitions or whatever it is, but simply because we believe that while it is attainable, and we are certainly smart and resourceful enough to attain said goal, it will just be too challenging, too difficult, too hard. It will take years and years and years of suffering and misery and loneliness. I'll have to, my kids will turn their backs on me, and my wife will leave me, and my dog will pee on my leg. I will wind up in a gutter, clutching a bottle of cheap wine. And then one day I will, in fact, write that book or make that movie or whatever it is. And it's just not the case. It's just not the case. That's just a cop-out. It's an excuse to not take action. And the only reason you don't take action is because your perception is such that you do not believe your reality is attainable. But you don't want to say it. It's very cool, very kosher to talk about hopes and dreams and goals and creating your life and attaining your reality and blah, 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 blah. But it only works if you take the action, if you go look for that which you want.
Right.
You've got to prepare to receive whatever it is you're looking for. And work is an absolute inextricable part of it. There's a scripture that says, at least I hope it's still there, and I hope it still says this.
Well, hold on, I'll look it up.
By the sweat of your brow shall ye eat bread all the days of your life. Okay?
Right.
Well, that sounds pretty stinking absolute. So you've got to learn to embrace that. You're going to have to look for it. You're going to have to work for it. You're going to have to take action to pursue your goals. If you don't have faith that you can attain them, you simply will not take action. You'll take other action. You'll move in a different direction. And so you've got to just define the direction you want to head in, and then head in that direction with absolute confidence and faith and work toward that goal. Sweat of your brow.
But you will find what you look for, and you will find what you work for. And it's not always going to be easy, because there's always a lesson, and you may come up short a couple times, but that's where the endurance comes in and the longevity of the goal. And you can't just throw in the towel. It's funny. Ronda Rousey. Okay, so let's talk about Ronda Rousey. Amazing fighter. Okay. Undefeated. Like balls to the wall. Amazing. I watched every one of her fights because they were short-lived and I could fit other things into my evening. But she won every time. Every time until the one time she didn't. Where'd she go?
Yeah.
Once she lost that one time, it was like the opposite of what you want, really. So she was invincible. She was absolutely invincible until the one time she lost. And she couldn't come back from it.
Yeah, well, she tried to come back and actually lost one more time.
Yes, she did. But it was that one time where all of a sudden it destroyed her confidence in being undefeated. And because she didn't believe that she was undefeated, she didn't believe that she could keep winning. She didn't.
That's right.
I mean, her last two fights, you're sitting on the edge of your seat and you're just like, come on, you can do this. Go, go, go. And the look in her eyes, if you will watch her fights prior to her first loss, she was unbelievable. But after that loss, after she finally took that one hit, the look in her eyes was completely different. And you cannot allow that to happen. You can't. You have to be able to take a beating and come back for more. And you have to have that passion, and you have to have that ability, because man, when she was on top, she was on top. It's funny because I knew a guy in Salt Lake that he was on the U.S. Olympic judo team, and he knew her mom back in the day. His name was Adam, and he knew her mom. And so right when she was coming into UFC, I was hanging out with him and his group of people, and at his judo place that he was teaching, and it was amazing. We had so many conversations about her invincibility. And then, a few years later, here I am, and we watched this fight. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't want to meet her in a dark alley on a bad day, on any day.
No doubt.
But it was that one moment where she faced adversity, and adversity won. And she didn't know how to pull herself back from that.
Ring, ring, ring. Hey, Rhonda, Vince is on the phone. Turns out you're invincible.
You're invincible, Rhonda.
Vince is on the phone. He wants to talk to you.
You can't. Now I've got my dogs all riled up because we're laughing so much.
Oh, that's all right.
You can't. You can't let yourself. You can't let that happen. You have to be able to get through the trials and the obstacles that stand in your way, and keep your eye on the prize, and keep the perception that you can win and you can succeed.
Right.
Because that's what changed for her. Her perception of reality changed in one fight.
Right. When she realized that she was, in fact, invincible, so to speak, then the passion and the drive and the focus and perhaps even the training changed. Everything changed.
Right.
And so that next fight was, she was out 15 seconds into the first round or something. It was just a joke. And not for me to say it's a joke, because like you, I would not want to. No, thank you.
I wouldn't take her on with you in a ring.
Yeah. I'm that middle-aged guy in the first row making bets on the fight. Thank you very much. I'm going to stay in my lane.
You and me both.
Not interested. Anyway.
But no, I mean, that's what it boils down to. But her perception changed. And so really your perception can change your direction on a dime if you're not prepared.
Which redefines your reality.
Yep. Absolutely.
And so in that vein, but it's not fair to say perception is reality necessarily, but perception does in fact define reality. And so you have to mold your perceptions in order to direct your life and take action with faith, and thus create your reality. It does have to do with what you choose to believe. And you can just choose what to believe.
Well, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I agree with you.
Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well.
Hey, Rhonda.
Rhonda. That's just awful. I hope she never hears this. Maybe I will run into her. Just show up at the door. It's like, yeah, Vince couldn't make it, so he sent me. Turns out you've got the same problem I do. Let me show you. Oh.
She's awesome. I mean, she is... Hey, Rhonda, if you're listening to this, you're way awesome. No. And I'm moving out of state soon. No, but it's just, you feel bad for her. You feel bad for, I feel bad for me in the times that I have given in to my own adversity. Everybody's done it. And it probably has changed the direction of my life a couple times. But from here on out, I won't let it happen again.
And the trick is, even if you do, and it's great to have that goal and to say that in that positive reinforcement, to say, I will simply never let that happen again.
Ever.
But the fact, in reality, things can happen again. Things absolutely happen again, and life tends to be, if history doesn't repeat itself, it certainly rhymes with itself, and that's the same for our own personal lives. And so the trick is to just be aware of who you are and what you want, and to constantly ask yourself, does this action, thought, or belief, or fudge brownie, or whatever, get me closer to what I want or further away?
Right.
And if it cannot pass that binary litmus test, everything I'm asking myself, is this getting me closer to my goal or further away? And if the answer is further away, then I stop it. I change it.
Right.
I kill the trade, or I distance myself from the client or the friend or whatever, because it's getting me further away from what I want. And I'm ever seeking to get closer to what I've defined that I want. I like to say what I think I want, because sometimes what I want is not necessarily the best for me long term. And God will slap me on the back of the head and open my eyes to that.
Right.
But certainly what I think I want or have decided I want in the moment. If it's not getting me closer, it's probably taking me further away, and so I'm not that interested.
That makes sense. Well, and I agree. I can't be so absolute with that, but I agree with you. It's an evolution for sure, but you have to remember, you always learn from your experiences. Good or bad, you learn from your experiences. So don't look at them as negative or positive. Look at them as just experiences that you can take a lesson from, and it'll keep you moving in the right direction.
That's right. Very good, then. Thanks so much for giving us a listen. And forever and as always, dream your life.
And live your dreams.
Until next time.
Bye-bye.